A preacher went into his church and he was praying to God. While he was praying, he asked, God, how long is 10 million years to you? God replied, 1 second. The next day, the preacher asked God, how much is $10 million to you? And God replied, 1 penny. Then finally, the next day, the preacher asked God, can I have one of your pennies? And God replied, just wait a sec. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of My Money, My Rules. So I imagine right now you've read this title and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to give myself a raise. That means I've got to make more income, right? Well, that's certainly one way to do it, but that's actually not what this is going to be about. I'm going to talk about, having multiple streams of income in a different episode. Right now, we're starting out slowly. We have to take some baby steps here. So there's one really excellent way for you to give yourself a raise that doesn't involve more income. When you have more income, that basically means you're adding. I'm not talking about adding right now. I'm talking about subtracting. Subtracting is actually a bit more important than adding, in my opinion. I mean, honestly, because there's many things that we can do to put back some money and have money available that with the same income that we have. And these are things that you're just not thinking about, or maybe you've been too lazy to really put in effort to do them. You're going to really know what some of these things are. This episode is definitely not going to be difficult to understand. It's going to be things that you've probably even heard before. But I want to give you a little bit different way of thinking about some of them. So what I want to talk about now for today is I'm going to give you 4 different ways to give yourself a raise. Okay. So number one, always save 10% of your income. You've probably heard this before, right? Save 10% of your income, but you may not have heard it this way. You need to save 10% of your income in the sense that you don't want to wait till the end to pay yourself. You're going to pay yourself first. Okay. Whatever bills you got, you have to look at what you're getting paid and take 10% and put it away every time and forget about it. I mean, just absolutely forget about it. Now, is it 10% of your gross pay or your net pay? Well, first of all, I want to be clear that gross pay is referring to what you get paid before taxes and everything are taken out of your paycheck. So if you make $50,000 a year, then $50,000 a year is your gross pay. But you know that you don't take home all that $50,000 a year, obviously, right? Because they take things out. So when they take things out, that's your net pay. The net pay is what shows up on your check. So should you take 10% of your gross before taxes, or should you take 10% of your net? Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave that up to you. A lot of people would say 10% of your gross. It needs to be, if you're making $50,000 a year, then you need to take out $5,000 a year. And I would say you really would need to do whatever it is that you can do. Okay, so if you discover that you just simply can't do 10% of your gross pay for whatever reason, then it's a good idea to at least do 10% of your net pay and stick it into account and just completely forget about it. You know, Benjamin Franklin said that a penny saved is a penny earned, and it really is. It's a great expression because when you put things back, that is a way to pay yourself. It is earned. You did earn it after all. Okay. And here's another thing too that you're probably already doing, because in this day and age, we it seems like we automate pretty much everything, and that includes paychecks. There's a good chance that your paycheck is going directly into an account of some form in a bank, right? It may even be an online bank, and that's fine. But there are some of us that still get paychecks. So we get that paycheck and then we have to take it to the bank, a physical paycheck, and deposit it that way or cash it. So but you want to automate as much as you can. So regardless if you actually have to go to the bank and deposit your check or you're getting paid automatically, have everything else automated. And I recommend that you have at the very least, 2 different accounts in the bank. Okay. One is for savings. That's for putting 10% away that you completely forget about. And why are we doing this? Why not just have it all in one account? Because we want to forget about it. Okay, if we have the same account for savings as we have for the one paying bills, it can be difficult to keep straight how much money you have that's savings and how much money that you have for bills. So if you take 10% and basically what I call throwing it into a pile somewhere, you're taking it and you're throwing it into this account, it's going to be gone and you don't have to worry about it for a long time. Okay. So one is for savings, and preferably it'll be a money market if you have enough. If you don't know the difference between the two, I'll make it really simple for you. You can think of a money market as also being a savings account because it's just an account that it pays better interest. And the reason why it pays better interest is because it's investing in something, and because they usually have a minimum amount that they want you to have in there at all times to get the better interest rate. So if you can get the better interest rate with a money market account instead of a savings account, then by all means, go for it. Okay. It's about this. Well, it really is the safest account that you can have, where you can access your money when you need it and at the same time get the best interest rate for it. So for your 10% coming out of your paycheck, go money market if you possibly can. But if you can't, go savings account at least. Okay, that's the first type of account, either money market or savings for your savings. All right, the second account is a checking account. And this is an account that I purposely want you to keep little money in. And what I mean by that is this is going to be an account that's specifically for paying bills. It has no other purpose but to pay the things that you have to pay. So whenever you're paying these things, they're going to come out automatically, a lot of them probably, because everything's so connected digitally now. So if you're going to be paying bills with that, it'd be better if you had an account that other people are going to know about that is specifically set up for paying bills, that has a low amount in it. Only as much as you need, plus, maybe a reserve of so much money that you can decide what that amount is. Now, why is that? Why do we purposely want to have such a small amount of money? It's because if you're going to have that account connected to so many different people that you're going to pay digitally somehow, even though it's highly unlikely they're going to take your account and just empty your account, you would much rather they emptied it when there's not very much money in there than if you had a lot. Because even though the account is insured, it's still a good idea to keep the accounts that are connected to other things having small amounts of money, while the ones that only the bank knows about, you can have them making interest and have more money in them. Okay, so those two accounts, checking account and a savings account or money market account at a minimum. But you could consider having a few others. For example, you could consider having an account that you basically treat like a savings account in the sense that you're putting money away, but it can be for yearly expenses. And I'm mainly talking about a vacation. So if you take a vacation every year and you've gotten so used to using a credit card to pay for that, we want to get you out of the habit of that, don't we? You need to get an account that's going to put money away, and it's going to be making interest, by the way. And you use that for whenever you take your vacation, and you purely use that. All right. So that you do not have to borrow money to take your vacation. If you don't have that money in there by the time the year's up and it's time to go on vacation, you don't get to go on vacation. I'm sorry, but it's not a necessity, because the first thing you need to be doing is paying off bills. And if you haven't done that yet, the things that are bearing interest, like credit cards, car loans, then they need to be paid off first. Now, maybe it's not exactly a vacation, though. Maybe it's like each year you go to visit family or something and you have to go. Okay, I understand that. And you're just going to go no matter what happens. You need to pay as much of it with cash or, a debit card that's linked to that account for yearly expenses as you possibly can. You don't want to use a credit card any more than necessary. So let's say that you have X amount of dollars that you want to use for vacation, but you discover you can't afford it. Should you put a little extra? Let's say that you're lacking, say, $1,000 for this vacation that you want to take, and you just don't quite make enough. Should you borrow 1,000? No, don't do that. You can only go on vacation with what you can afford to pay. So you could have an account set up for that, because the idea being you're going to forget about it for a little while, just like you did the savings account. And the other accounts that you could consider having in the bank if you wanted to would be, say, like if you had a business account, you're going to need one for that. But you probably don't need that many. It's getting to where it's getting a lot whenever that happens. But it's nice when you have certain accounts that serve a particular function. And now the second way to give yourself a raise. This is called the law of halves. And I saw this done by someone that was a financial advisor, and I thought it was really interesting concept that I hadn't thought about before, and I haven't seen it in other places. But the law of halves is basically a way of really just eliminating things that you tend to overuse. Okay. And there are some things that you overuse without even thinking about it. Now, the example that he gave, and it's a pretty good one, is toothpaste. So let's imagine what you've been seeing in commercials your whole life, right? When you see commercials and they're talking about the type of toothpaste and how to put it on there, they're basically stretching that toothpaste out over the whole toothbrush, right? I can even remember there was once a time where I saw a commercial where it was like a sideways S. It made like a curl up and down, and that's how much, just so that they could get that much more toothpaste on the toothbrush, right? Is all that really necessary? Well, you would need to ask your dentist ultimately, but I had heard from that particular person that it's not. So he decided we're going to cut this in half and see if it still works. So instead of the full toothbrush, putting the toothpaste on just half of the bristles of the toothbrush, is that enough? Is that enough to brush your teeth? And as it turns out, from what he said, it was. So he decided, wow, okay, I'm going to cut that in half now. And then he made it to where it was only a quarter of the brush. And you know what? That worked too. Okay. And then he tried an eighth of the bristles of the toothbrush. And it turns out that didn't work. Was not enough toothpaste to get your teeth clean, right? But he did discover by only putting just a quarter on there, he was saving a tremendous amount of toothpaste. Now, if you're only doing this for like a week, you're doing it like for a year even, or even a couple of years, you're not going to save much of anything. But when you do this over a lifetime, I mean, I'm talking about from the very beginning, whenever you're brushing your teeth all the way to the end, teach your kids to do it even. You could take that money and invest it somehow and make more than you probably think it would be just by eliminating a little bit of toothpaste. And remember, we're only talking about toothpaste here, okay? What about other things that you overuse that you could cut down on and then invest the difference? What about, say, detergent for your clothing? Is the amount of detergent that you're using for your clothing, is that the right amount? Or what would happen if you cut that in half? What if before putting the detergent in the clothes washer, what if you did it half and in order to see if that would get the clothes clean? And if it does, cut it in half again and find the place to where it doesn't work anymore, and then go back up to the one that does. There's a good chance that you're overusing. And if you are, now you've got two things that you could cut back on. That's detergent now and toothpaste, if you did both of those. Okay, so we're kind of getting somewhere now. See how this starts to snowball? What about something else? And you ultimately can think of all of them yourself because you know your situation better than I do. But here's a big one. What about air conditioning and heat? Let's say that you like for your air conditioner to be at 70 degrees in the summer. That's just the magical temperature for you. Well, what if you brought that up just 1 degree? Okay. And it wouldn't save a great deal if you only did it for a week, obviously. But if you did it for a very long time, I think you're catching on right now, right? It's going to save a tremendous amount. And what if you brought it up another degree to 72 degrees and up to 73 until you found that spot where you could handle it and might not be too uncomfortable? And of course, it'd be the opposite with the heat. What if you were to turn the temperature down another degree and another degree? How much can you handle? Right? You might find that you become accustomed to it even, and you actually get used to those temperatures. So that is a tremendous savings right there, is heat and air conditioning. Everyone says to use less, but I'm telling you right now, do it gradually. You're afraid of those extremes, aren't you? Do it gradually and see where it takes you. And well, what's something else that you could do? There's more things. How about hot water whenever you take a shower? How much hot water do you really need? And of course, there's also the amount of time that you use the water. So you've got to heat that water up. Well, what if you just ever so slightly turn the temperature down just a little bit? You would notice that in time, you would start getting used to that new temperature. And then once you get used to that new temperature, you turn it down just a little bit more. I mean, ultimately, you could get used to taking showers that were, somewhere between cold and warm. Believe it or not, you can do that. And you would save a lot on the temperature. You would save a lot on heating that water up. So it's all kinds of things like this. And I hadn't even talked about bad habits. Maybe you don't want to completely, quit drinking soft drinks, but maybe you cut that in half. Okay. And that's going to save you a tremendous amount of money, especially with something like that your body definitely doesn't need. So yeah, we're not even talking about habits. There's plenty of habits that you probably have that could save you a great deal. So apply the law of halves to all kinds of things, all kinds of things. And you might be surprised just how much money you end up saving and thereby making, right? You're giving yourself a raise by not using things you don't need. So that's number 2, the law of halves. What's number 3? Number 3, cook your own food. Now, I can feel some of you shrugging. You're probably shrugging right now, just having to listen to that, and you don't want to do that. You are used to eating out all the time, and that's all you want to do. Well, again, I'm telling you, do this gradually, okay? If suddenly you go out and get a cookbook and you're trying to cook, like 7 different things during the week, yeah, you're going to give up on it. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. It's too much of an extreme change from what you're used to. So do this. Learn to cook. If you don't know how to cook anything, I'm just assuming you don't here, learn how to cook just one thing really well. Do that and start with that. And you might want to know, what is it you can cook? It's different for people. But here's what I would recommend. I would recommend that you learn how to cook a good soup, and preferably one that's water-based. Why water-based? Well, because we already don't get enough water. So, when you consume that soup, I know you don't think of it as drinking water, and it's not, but you are still consuming a liquid. And so that will help your body get some of the water that it needs during the day. And not only that, but if it's water-based and not cream-based, it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper to make. And you don't have to make it complicated. There's plenty of simple recipes out there that you can use. It's just basically cutting up vegetables and maybe some sort of a meat and cooking it. And here's the best part. You can make a lot of it just once a week and freeze it and have soup and just use it whenever you need it. But learn to cook at least one thing, just one thing. And then when you get used to cooking that so much that you get to the point that you don't even have to think about it anymore, well, then you could start, with maybe something else. And now you got 2 things that you can cook really well. If you get to where you can cook 3 things really well, that's food for a whole week, basically. You have it right there, you have it ready, and the first one that you would eat during the week would be the one that you can't freeze. Okay, so it wouldn't be, I don't know what an example of that would be, but just things like you don't freeze salads. That doesn't work. But so you would want to eat the first thing that you don't freeze and that you can't freeze, and then move on to the ones that you can during the week, possibly. And then now you have saved a tremendous amount of money by just learning how to cook one thing, really. But move it on up to 2 and at least 3. And then you might be surprised how much you like it, but make it gradual. Make it gradual, just like you're making everything, like you're doing everything else. Because if you don't, there's a good chance you won't do it. Don't be so extreme. Make it gradual. And now here is the 4th thing that, and this might be the one you may not want to hear very much, and especially because you're pressured by so many other people. But number 4, what's the number 4 way you can give yourself a raise? Drive your car better. I'm sorry to say that. I know you don't want to hear that, but drive it better. Now, what do I mean by driving better? You've probably heard about a lot of these things. You're just not doing them. So, for example, when I see people speed up to a red light, I just don't get it. I'm sitting here driving. I know that the intersection I'm coming to, I can see that the traffic light is red. Everybody can see it, but there's always somebody that's just hauling up there as fast as they can go almost, and then they have to hit the brakes because of all the other cars that are at the intersection. There is no point in doing this. This is the biggest waste because you literally gain nothing. You do not gain anything by doing this. There is no winning in this. All there is losing. You are just losing gasoline, which costs money. And I'm sorry, but you don't get a right to complain about how much gas is whenever you're doing something like this. Okay. You got to be responsible enough to not burn gas for no reason. Once you're being more responsible about the way you drive your car, then you get to maybe complain if you want to. But if you can afford to burn gas like that, then you can afford the gas. I'm sorry. What's another way that you can do this with your car? Well, another way that you can save money with your car is kind of almost the opposite. After that light is turned green and you're sitting at the intersection, don't smash on the gas and just speed up as fast as you can. Just ease into it. I mean, not obsessively so, because people behind you may not be expecting that, but I think you know what I mean. Just ease up to that speed that you need to get to, because stopping and going, it uses up a tremendous amount of gas. So you're probably not going to get anywhere too much quicker by doing so. And whatever it is that you're trying to get to, you're trying to get there quicker on, it's probably not going to be worth the gas that you're going to spend. Now, here's the next one about a car. Consider driving 5 miles per hour slower than the speed limit on highways and interstates. Okay. I know you don't want to do that. Yeah, I get it. In fact, you're probably driving a little bit over the speed limit. But let me give you an example that might surprise you here. Let's say that you have to drive 25 miles to your destination. Let's say it's 25 miles to work. Okay. Well, let's say that on the interstate, the bypass or whatever you're on, that the speed limit happens to be 70 miles per hour. Okay, well, if you got to go 25 miles and you're driving an average of 70 miles per hour, you'll get there in about 22 minutes. Okay. Now, let's say that you decide to drive that 5 miles per hour slower, so you go 65. How long do you think it's going to take now for you to get there? Will it be a big difference? Not at all. Not hardly at all. If you are driving 25 miles and you go instead of 70 miles per hour, if you drive 65 miles per hour, it will take you 23 minutes to get there. It's really about more like a minute and a half, somewhere in there, but you're literally only saving 1 minute by driving 70 instead of 65 miles per hour. Now, consider the gas you're spending. I wish I could tell you how much gas you're spending, but I have no way of knowing that unless I know what kind of car you're driving and the difference that 5 miles per hour happens to make at that speed. And I don't know what that is because every car is different. And it also depends on what the gas prices are. But don't you think that whatever it is, it's probably a lot, especially in the long run, since we all have to drive everywhere? Don't you think that it's going to be a considerable amount of savings and you're only going to have to spend 1 more minute in your car in this particular example? I mean, what is it you're in such a hurry that you can't wait an extra minute to do anyway? Drive to work? So think about what you're doing whenever you're driving a particular speed. If you just ease off of it a little bit, you can save a lot of gasoline. And it's probably not going to make much difference in the amount of time it takes to get there. Very little. Okay, the next thing on cars that you need to do better on is keeping your tires inflated. Believe it or not, making sure that your tires are always inflated to what they're supposed to be does save a tremendous amount of gas because it takes it a lot easier on the car. Whenever the tires, it makes the car not to have to work as hard if they're inflated at what they're supposed to be. Okay, stay constant on your oil changes. Okay, I think that most of you probably do that. Most people, I think, are too scared to go way beyond what they're supposed to. But if you stay on your oil changes, your car is going to last longer. It'll run better. Okay. And this last one here is something only to do if you can do with your car. Drive a manual transmission whenever you can. Now they're basically fading out. They may not even be here much longer. But I have been driving a manual transmission all my life. I learned how to drive on the manual, and I'm so glad that I did because it typically uses less gas and it's easier on your brakes because you can use the different gears to slow down. I've had my car for a very long time, and I still have not had to change the brakes yet. It's getting close now, but I've got a car that has almost 200,000 miles, and I have not had to change the front brakes once because I'm able to use my gears to slow down. So you will save money on gas with the standard and your manual transmission, and you're also going to save money probably on repairs. They're a lot easier to fix than an automatic is too. But again, if you can't do this, I realize this is a big challenge, both finding one and also learning to drive it if you don't know how to drive. So, but if you're able to do that, that would help too. And then the next one here, don't keep your car running for a long amount of time. If you're sitting still, just turn the car off. Consider if you're in a drive-through, consider going inside because you might be there for a long time. You're just burning gas again. And how much does it take to be able to get out of your car and then sit back down in your car? I mean, this is something that you can do that doesn't take a whole lot of effort. And plan your trips well. When you're planning trips, make it to where you're going. If you have to do 5 things during a day, that you do all 5 of them instead of going to 1 or 2 things one day and 1 or 2 things the next day. And try to put all your errands in one trip so that you use as little gas as possible. So those are the things that you can do in order to save money on your car. And you notice here, I'm only talking about the way that you drive your car. I didn't say anything about how to buy a car and what kind to buy and those kinds of things. That's for a different episode because you probably have a car right now. So before we get to that, how about the car that you have right now you start driving that a lot better. So those are the four things. Those are the four things that you need to do in order to give yourself a raise. Okay. You need to put 10% away. You need to remember the law of halves. You need to learn how to cook. And you also need to drive your car more responsibly. If you were to do those four things, can you even begin to imagine the amount of money that you would be saving and putting back that you have? I mean, really think about that. You need to be doing these things before we start adding to your income. First, let's subtract expenses because there's no point in adding to your income if you're just going to waste that income too. So subtract those expenses. Do this. That's the thing that you've got to do before the next episode is that you need to pay yourself first, utilize the law of halves, drive your car better, and learn how to cook something. That's it for today. Hope you got something out of this episode, and we'll see you next time.